several years. And again, I'm here to share all my decades of knowledge, trying to put it into an intro piece that we can kind of learn a little bit about behavior, but also have takeaways that you guys actually can use today, which is beautiful. Even if you're in the classroom, not in the classroom, these behavior tips and tricks, they apply to everyone. So I will kind of focus it as working with children and youth, but at the same time, behavior is everybody. So I did put my email down there at the bottom. It's Laney_Marianne@sccollege.edu. Email me anytime, even if you're not one of my students. I can hopefully answer questions for you, guide you to community resources, or say, hey, check out this or look at that. I'm open to sort of answering a few questions and helping guide people on their path to get more answers to those questions. So speaking of questions, this is what we're going to cover today. This is the workshop description, and I don't need to read it word for word, but this is what we're covering today. In other words, we have a flow, but I want to make sure I'm giving you guys an opportunity to throw in some questions you may have so I can write it down and make sure I answer those along the way. So any questions you have before we get started about behaviors? I'll take 3 at least, either in the chat, raise your hand, or just jump in. And if Ronnie, you get some in the chat, let's see if I can get it. Yeah, I can get the chat.
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay, cool. Any questions? Let me go back one. Any questions about behavior? Like, what makes you nervous? What have you seen before? Anything?
Hi, I have a question.
Hi, Sally. Thanks for jumping in.
Thank you. Okay, I also interested in special needs.
Yes.
That's what I want to get into. But even talking about right now, my heart's beating so fast. It's because there's so many different the kids, they're so sweet, but it's like now you can't discipline them anymore. And it's like you're trying to figure out, well, how do you set them aside and talk with them without letting the parent look at you and want to get you and hang you by your neck and don't talk to my kids like that. And
so I hear what you're saying is that you feel stuck a little bit. Like
I have not even had the chance to work with children yet, but I do have family and friends that have children, and I could already see how they're already taking over the parents.
Yeah, it's hard. There's a couple of things there too. Number one, children have not been on the planet as long as you and me, right? So they don't have the same skills that you and I have. Number two, parents, we have our own training, right? We grew up with this thing that happened a certain way, but life is different now, right? There's technology, there's stress, there's COVID, and then you have a child with special needs, their brain is built differently. So all these things that we come with as adults don't necessarily apply. And so I will talk about both sides of the behavior coin, because at the bottom line, number one, we all have behavior, right? It just depends on how old we are, how sophisticated we are, how developmentally on track we are or not. And adults have behavior too. And a lot of times adults make the mess. We get in the way of just being able to decipher or figure out, or just be a sleuth into what's actually going on. So hopefully we're going to talk about both sides of those coin today and give you some tips and tricks that you can walk away with. Again, this is a foundation piece. There's a lot more to go. If you notice, I have a bunch of books behind me. I will share with you all the resources that, make my behavior flag fly. But again, there's a lot in here. So thank you, Sally. Who has another question? So I'll try special needs. Let's see.
Will we be able to go back on this video later on? Will it be sent to us on the link? Because there's a lot of stuff that you just barely begun to talk and you've already tickled every question I'm having. And I'm sure you're going to come up with other things that I didn't even think about asking. And I would really like to go back on it, because as a future new teacher, starting a new career from being an LVN to now wanting to go into education, it's
a lot,
because you can't make everybody happy.
No, you cannot, and it is not your, yeah. Yeah,
you know
so
what?
Patricia, thank you. Veronica, are we gonna share the recordings?
Yes, we're going to be adding them to our website, and I'll put the link in the chat box. They should be available for you to view by next Friday.
Thank you so much,
You're
Veronica.
welcome.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So yes, Patricia kind of jumped in on something. As adults, we also have like a little bit of anxiety and worry about, like, are we doing a good job? Are we going to be able to manage this child? Are we going to be able to manage the adults who are protective of this child? There's a lot of different factors in here. And so if you are having some questions or anxieties or worries, you kind of are in the right spot. If you weren't worried and you got, oh, I got this fine, no problem, there's probably some things to work on. Excellent. So I have 2 more hands raised. Who wants to jump in?
I'll go ahead.
Good.
I have a desire to work with special needs children. I have a son who is in middle school now, but I've volunteered in his classroom all through elementary. He went to a co-op preschool. I've been very involved in school, and that's kind of where my passion came from. But you know, there have been students in his classroom and through school who, you know, have, you know, some behaviors that happen. And, you know, I try to sit back. I watch what the teacher does and how she tries to handle it. But then I also think, gosh, I don't know if I have the confidence, and I want to know what I need to do to have the confidence to, you know, be in that situation with a child, because I would be afraid I would make it worse.
Okay, that is a very normal anxiety piece or worry, or you're self-regulating, you're starting to like self-reflect, which is perfect. I can tell you, when I started this work, I thought kids were all just so sweet and like fragile and stuff. And I had to be taught how to take a toy out of a child's hand. So just know we all grow in this field. I was like, I can't take a toy out of a child's hand. And my supervisor said, yeah, you can, watch me. Boom. And they didn't fall apart and they didn't explode. So our confidence builds as we get more information and we keep moving forward. Excellent, Jennifer. Thank you. I'm going to hit that too. So we have special needs, parents and kids, confidence. I'm going to keep moving forward. If there's another question, something super burning, I'll give one more space for one more question that's super burning, but the other ones can pop up as we go. Good, because I'm going to keep moving forward. Who's got a burning question? I can make sure like we.
Hi, my name is Sandy. Hi.
Sandy, jumping in. I love it.
I'm back in school at 54 years old because I've worked as an instructional aide, you know, special education. I think I put off school because I'm really slow. And I learned a lot about myself by working with the therapists and psychologists, all of that. I've learned. Anyways, I just want to drop that in real quick. And it's because when I was writing down your email address, I was real slow and I was like,
I will put it in, you know what?
I can find it. I've learned now a little bit how to find it, but I got used to when I first started coming to school, just raising my hand and saying, can you put that back? So anyways, I'll just.
You know what, Veronica can put it in the chat, and I'm going to share a couple other things in the chat later too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Laney_Marianne at sccollege.edu. I definitely, like I said, I'm open for everybody. Just email me if you have a question. I'll get to you. And if I don't have the answer, I'll find somebody who does. I just feel like we all need to learn together. And for that piece that Sandy said, I feel that I didn't go into the work because I feel slow. Listen to me. You have been on the planet longer than these children. No matter how unconfident you feel, and this goes for everybody, you are still a step ahead. You still know more than they do. You are still a leader to them. We'll talk about that more here too. So I think that's a beautiful thing, to be humble coming into this, because if you weren't, that would be the problem. When people say, I'm not sure if I'm a good leader for these kids because I have all these flaws and I'm disorganized or whatever it is. Come on. Some of the best teachers are disorganized, but their heart is big enough to take the moment to address the behavior. And that's that pivotal piece that they need. And honestly, it helps you too. So I'm glad you guys shared that, and I'm going to keep those in mind as we keep going.
Right. And Marianne, there's
Yes.
some questions that are coming in, but I think there'll be things that you'll be answering through your presentation. So let's let your presentation go, and then we'll go back and pick up those questions if
Excellent.
they haven't been addressed.
Beautiful. Yes. So this is basically we're going to cover. These are three main areas that we're going to cover today. The basics of behavior. And again, my philosophy here on presenting is I don't read every word to people. I talk through things. I talk with things. I do talk fast, so I'm glad that we are recording. And we're also going to talk about it's not just behavior. Some behavior is the tip of the iceberg. What you see is only a piece of that gem or that puzzle that's happening in the moment. And as adults, I definitely want to empower you all to know that even when you have this big behavior in front of you, you guys can handle it. You guys are stronger than you know. You are you're coming into an industry that is not an easy industry. And Lord knows there's a lot of like upsides and downsides, but you guys are committed. You're here already, right? Even if you see this big behavior, you can handle it, because I'm going to give you some tips and tricks where you can just take a moment to look past what you see. Our eyes do play tricks on us a lot of times, especially when it comes to something big and it seems overwhelming and your heart's pounding and you're like, what do I do? Right? We have skills in place already to be a leader for children who, again, have only been on the planet for however long. If you are a multi-subject teacher and you're teaching third grade, you have, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. Guess what? You do know more than them. You do know more than them. I promise you, you're going to be okay. And you know what? Not every day is perfect, and everybody is entitled to a bad day. We'll keep going. Okay. Yes, the last part is what we can do about it. The takeaways. I personally can tell you when I attend a seminar or a workshop, when they're just talking at me and it's just like all these concepts and I can't take anything away with me. That's a little frustrating for me. So I'm trying to try to give you guys some actual things that you can do today, that you can look at your world, with some little bit more critical eyes and just basics, because I know we have a lot on our plates right now. There's a lot of overwhelm going. But I wanted to start with some foundational shared language, this concept that we can just all agree upon. And I'm sort of like leading you to this agreement, but these are foundations of behavior. Okay. Behavior doesn't just occur in isolated events, right? It doesn't just happen in a classroom. It happens all the time, right? And a lot of times people hear the word behavior and they think it's code for big behavior, but we're going to look at behavior as a blanket, as a concept, and then we'll talk about other behaviors. So number one, behavior is neither good nor bad. A lot of times as adults, this is where we do trip up. We say that's bad behavior. That's good behavior. Yes, but and no, because we're already putting a value judgment or a bias on there. And a lot of times kids who just sit there quietly and they're just, people pleasing and they're ready to be the teacher's helper all the time, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's helpful or functional, or sometimes it's covering up trauma. And so we'll talk more about that too. If you say your behavior is bad, we're not looking at a growth piece. We're stuck in a moment. That was bad behavior. We can say we made bad choices. That's okay, because that was a bad choice to hit a friend or throw that and things like that. So, but behavior in itself is neither good nor bad. You and I have a behavior. We behave all the time. Your behavior of showing up right now, me showing up right now, is a behavior. We have behaviors. It's neither good nor bad. Likewise, children are never good or bad. If you are saying things like that kid is spoiled rotten, you've already locked that child down into a category and a value judgment on there. Or that's what a good little student, what a good little helper. Again, that kind of locks us into a place where what if that good little helper has a bad day? So children are never good or bad. They're just children, and you make mistakes and they make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And again, when we start to label them, that's the bad kid, that's the bad seed, that's the troublemaker, that's the kid who can't sit still. You're locking yourself into a mindset with this child, and it's really hard to see them otherwise. So again, drop the labels, drop the value judgments. We're going to talk about bias in here as well. Again, keep in mind all behavior, going back to the first one, all behavior is communication. whether or not it's nonverbal communication or it's really loud. If you want to work with high school students and they're the one who like throws something at you, says F you and runs out the room, that's behavior, yes, but they're saying something underneath those words. So again, we're looking at things in a pure sense so we can get a good foundation. So when that big moment happens, we act accordingly. Okay, we act appropriately and accordingly. So especially when it comes to special needs people, anybody who's having a bad day, anybody who needs extra support, we always use person first language. This means it's not the special needs kid. We don't say that. You know why? The special needs is a program, not a person, right? We wouldn't say that child who has a learning disability, or the man in the wheelchair, or the woman who has cerebral palsy. You are a human first, you are a person first, and then the things that define you are after those times. Does that make sense? Because this is, so we don't say the bully child. We said the child who's got some bullying behaviors or some challenges around being very forceful, right? It is a person first who is experiencing something. If we define people by their adjectives, we've lost the humanity, right? Same thing as if somebody said to you, oh, well, you're the brown-eyed girl. Yeah, but what does my eye color have to do with who I am? I'm a person first, right? I get this, oh, the blonde chick. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? It's these little inherent biases that show up in our language. And so we're going to talk about that as well today. Down in the bottom corner here, there's nothing wrong with a child. Children are not wrong. Children are not wrong. They have made a choice in the moment that wasn't a great choice, but there's nothing wrong with the child. You have to start thinking, this 4-year-old or this 14-year-old is doing the best that they can at the moment. And maybe that looks terrible, and maybe it's really destructive and they're spewing hate out of their mouth. But consider the fact that they are doing the best that they can at that exact moment. It's just same as you and I. We have bad days, or sometimes we have bad moments. And did we wake up and say, I want to have a bad day today? I've not met a person who said that to themselves, especially little kids. They want to be your friend. They want to be on your good side. They want to be people pleasing. Teenagers kind of do wake up and say, whose buttons can I push today? I do agree. But up to a certain point, they're all just trying to, get the attaboy, attagirl, get the smile, the thumbs up, the great job, anything. They're trying to not be in trouble. They're trying to follow along. They're trying to make an easy life for themselves. But sometimes things show up that block that, right? And we'll talk more about that too. Children 100% look to adults as the leader. Even if you don't feel like a leader, you are there. You're the big one in the classroom. And again, this even applies at home, right? They look to you as the leader. And no matter how insecure you might feel or unconfident you might feel, you do know more than that child. Just little things like staying regulated, even if you have a tickle in your nose. Some kids, once they have a tickle in their nose, they can't think of anything else, imagine anything else. You and I are like, got a tickle in the nose, and I'll just rub it and keep moving forward. Things like that is actually how children learn to manage those things. They look to you to how to behave in these manners that they will eventually behave like. So what are you putting forward? Yeah. You're more confident than you think. And last one, teachers are not doctors and doctors are not teachers. Okay. We're not here to diagnose. We don't guess. We're not here to say, oh, that kid has autism. I see it. I have not met a teacher who went to medical school first. Never in my life. I'm sure they are out there. And vice versa. When I'm with the doctor and they say, well, the teacher should X, Y, and Z, I'm like, wow, you got your credential too? Amazing. Listen, we're just here to look at the behavior and help the child in the moment. Help the child. We all need help, right? That child needs help, right? You need help sometimes. I need help sometimes. That child needs help. They don't need a judgment. They don't need a diagnosis in the moment. They don't need any of that business. Let me stay there for a second. Questions. Let me field a question or two here, because I know there's a bunch.
Actually have 3 that came in through the chat box. I don't know if you want me to read those out to you.
You pick which ones you think are appropriate. Yeah.
This is from Michael. He says, would you say that designating a child as good or bad not only defines the relationship between the adult and child, but also can be internalized by the child themselves? Meaning, can our bias become the bias and the child takes on to themselves?
Absolutely. Listen, even your dog will answer to a certain name. If you call your dog Booger enough, it will answer to that. So will a child. And I'm not saying children are dogs. I'm just saying we all will internalize, especially if they love you, if they really idolize in you. Great question, Michael. And I think you know the answer. Once you value judge a child, they believe you. Why wouldn't they believe you? Children aren't able to say, like, I love this person and I admire this person and I look up to this person, except for this one part over here where I think they're kind of making it up or having a bad day or lying about me. Kids aren't at a certain level, aren't that sophisticated. And then when they become that sophisticated, they turn into teenagers who then lose all the respect for you. So yeah, watch your language, watch what you say, watch the value judgments, because you are coming from a place of, I have it all figured out and you don't, that I'm good and you're bad and I'm right and you're wrong. Oof, that causes so many arguments from children all the way up to adults. It's wild. Please check yourself. We're going to talk about implicit and explicit bias in here as well too. Excellent question, Michael. Another one, perhaps? This is a lot here. 6 different things on this slide.
I don't know if I should raise my hand or
jump in, Patricia.
With the use of first person language, I know in the Hispanic community, we have a bad habit of calling our kids nicknames like gordita, which means fat, or vinegrita, or is it bad that we would tell the parents, hey, you know, we shouldn't use that because, you know, at some point you start feeling like, hey, you know what, I am fat.
Okay, so same thing like Michael said, the students will live up to the name, right? And if you had a nickname that you didn't like, there's children who have the nickname that they didn't like, okay? So there's that too. So approaching a parent is very tricky because you don't want to say it in the negative. You want to always use the positive and say, you know, we choose to use their name or something positive, and we're seeing that might not be a positive representation, right? And
so you can't tell the parent that though.
Yes, here's the deal. As you get into a school, you're gonna figure out roles there too. If you are the teacher in a classroom, yes, you can probably have a conversation with the parent. If you are a preschool teacher, you have to leave that one up to the director, right? Okay. And always use it in the positive. Always use it in the positive. We don't want to say, well, you're calling him a bad name, so you shouldn't do that. I call that shoulding. Don't should on someone else. Like, don't should on yourself.
We're told not to call them honey, sweetheart, or baby.
Yeah,
because
same thing. We're infantilizing children. They're stuck if you call them baby, right? And there are cultural practices there where we call like little boys papa and little girls mommy, things like that. I think it's confusing, but again, I'm coming from the outside and seeing that. I would love to talk more about that at some other time. And we do talk about these in our classes and how our biases and how we talk to children or how we even think about children has to do with how we treat them and how the words that we use with them. Right. And so we have to be a little bit more careful because true or false, or let me say it this way, true or true, children are little sponges. Yeah, true. 100%, 1,000,000% true. They will pick up the stuff that you even muttered under your breath. So if you're calling them like, oh, princesa, like, what do you think that's going to do to what do you think that's going to do to a child? I do have a list of shared resources I'm going to share at the end. And there's a whole whiteboard animation from Carol Dweck on mindset. And if you keep telling your child that they're a genius when they're a toddler, that will backfire on them. That will backfire on them. And they stop trying hard because they just have been told they're a genius. And why should a genius try so hard? Beautiful resource. Great. Excellent.
Wonderful points, Marianne. There was one other question. You might be addressing this in the future, but let me just ask it for this student's benefit.
Go ahead.
How do you explain to a child that their behavior is unacceptable in a positive way?
Oh, yes. So instead of saying don't hit your friend, we say our hands are used for fill in the positive blank, right? And so again, we have to talk to a child developmentally appropriately. We don't talk to a 2-year-old in 12-year-old terms, right? We talk to a 2-year-old in 2-year-old terms. We say, uh-oh. We don't say, oh my God, you did that wrong. You're a terrible child. We say, oh, uh-oh, remember, a lot of reminding at toddlers, right? A lot of reminding in 2 and 3 and 4. Uh-oh, remember, we use our hands for nice touches. Remember, we keep the sand in the sandbox. Remember, remember, we touch our friends nicely. We don't touch anybody without permission. We keep it very light, because if you come down heavy-handed on it, 2 things are going to happen. They're going to know it pushes your buttons, and they're going to do it more, right? Because you've seen a twinkle in a kid's eye, like, ooh, that's going to upset Miss Sarah. Let's do more of that. They do get sophisticated on that. Again, this is our concept of children. If you think children are young and dumb, you're already done. They're gonna run circles around you for fun, right? The other thing that can happen when you are very negative with them, they will take on that negativity, and you'll see that in their peer interactions. And then sometimes they'll be the one who's like telling everybody no, no, no. One thing I do challenge parents and teachers to do is to try go an hour without saying no. And then 2 hours, and then a half a day, and then a day, and see how that works. It's wild. It's really hard. Instead of saying, no, you can't do that, say, yes, we can do this instead. Or when they say, I need that right now. Oh, that sounds great, but let's do this first, right? First this, then that, right? So there's a lot of things that we do. So our language makes a huge difference here, because if you're always coming at it negatively, the children are going to get that general malaise of like, you don't like them. You don't want to be here. And there's always somebody in that crowd who's already in that little dark cloud. It doesn't need to be you, right? Especially if you are that teacher, if you are that leader for them. So these are fantastic questions. This fires me up. Thank you, guys. This is great. I love this discourse and this dynamic interaction. So this is a lot on here. And again, I'm glad that you guys are going to get the recordings so you guys can go back to, again, going through all these. Right. So again, the basics of emotions here. We already know this, but this is age appropriate, especially even if somebody's older, and we already know mad, sad, or glad. If you are in a state, if you are in distress, if you are having a bad day, or you're angry, or you're enraged, or you're sad, sometimes this is all we can manage. It's just mad, sad, or glad. And Dan Siegel, which was a really fantastic author, and I have that in my resources later. It's a Google Doc. You guys have it. Dan Siegel has books like this called Brainstorm, The Power and Purpose of the Teenage Brain, which is beautiful in my house, and The Whole Brain Child, plus a workbook. Fantastic. Name it to tame it. If you don't know the emotions underlying, then you're already going to be behind when it comes to the behaviors. So if you can't even, again, with little kids, it's mad, sad, or glad, or, glad is kind of an old term, but we would say happy, mad, sad, or happy, right? How are you feeling? Start from there. And then we can move towards, as we get more sophisticated, something that looks like this. So this comes from Diane Albert in the little spot of emotions and feelings. I love this stuff. And again, even though this looks kind of kid-like, and let's say maybe you want to go into like middle school teaching, guess what? When we are having a rough day, some of this stuff is just, it's basic, but it's very, very good. I just found a resource on Twitter. I'll see if I can share it with you guys later, that she has a whole teacher prep kit for this kind of business with like 180 handouts and activities and things like that. Very, very sweet. And again, I have a middle schooler at home who thinks he's like cool and whatnot. And I ran this by him and said, what do you think about this? What if I was going to use this in my class? I wanted to see how he responded, right? And he's like, yeah, this is kind of cool. And I said, what do you think about the colors? Like, angry and stuff is red, and then but like proud and happy and confident is orange. Would you agree? He's like, yeah, I think the colors are right. And then he talked mostly about the gray ones, the anxiety and piece like that. And anxiety is on the rise with all children right now, with COVID and not being in school, and then transitioning to school and all this business. This is a really easy way to identify behaviors. And so, emotions that are kind of the underlying piece of behaviors. So what do you guys think about something like this? There's a lot of resources out there, but I just think this is one that's really easy to understand really, really quick. What do you guys think about this?
It's actually perfect. At the hospital, that's how we ask the patient how they feel. And it's a little, you know, it actually makes you even feel good when you look at it because you'll even laugh because
they're cute, right? Look at what the one in the corner says, confused. I was like, yeah, right there, accurate 1,000,000% right there. Or invisible. I thought, ooh, the colors, I think where a lot of people are visual learners. And so maybe even if somebody's not a good reader, they can understand maybe the face and the color. Yeah, so this is just one of the resources that are out of there. And so even here, her little prompt in the corner says like, can you point how you're feeling now? And as kids get older, it's conflicting ones, it's opposite ones. And that just shows you that their brain is actually growing to say, I love my mommy, but I hate it when she drinks, right? So these conflicting feelings will show you developmentally appropriate progress on where they are. You know, some smaller kids are just going to go with color. I'm feeling green today. Awesome. And as they get older, they can get more sophisticated. And there's more even for adults, but I can tell you, I will lean back on this, especially when I'm kind of like, you know, not having a good day, or I don't feel right, or I didn't eat right, or I didn't sleep right. This helps me. And actually on her website, she has little stuffies too. They're so great. They're so great. So excellent work. I do want to talk about how emotions show up. Okay, because sometimes people really process emotions like literally in your heart. If you've ever felt your heart ache over something, or your chest get tight and you're breathing, so our body will feel it. So I jumped to the pink here piece. Our body will feel emotions differently. Sometimes they do kind of make our head hot and tingly. Sometimes they're in our chest and we get tight. Sometimes we just got to have extra energy. We got to get it out. But there's also the thinking piece about it. And so as we have emotions, we process them because we are humans and we process them up here, and they create these new neural pathways. Now, again, a lot of big emotions create a lot of neural pathways, and a lot of those unresolved emotions will keep making those pathways very, very concrete. So all teachers do need to know proper cognitive development, proper cognitive. What is age appropriate at this age for a child to be thinking, feeling, learning, right? And even at this age and at this age, or what is a typically expected cognitive milestone, or any milestone, versus is this child a little bit delayed? And that will help us try to understand. I definitely can tell you, with I have a child who has a bunch of different issues at home, there's a chronological age and then there's a developmental age. And while his body and his calendar keeps moving forward, you have this kind of a stuck piece where he's still in 8th grade, he still's watching Paw Patrol and things like that. So you see this piece where they want to be like their peers, but you also see this piece where they're a little bit, they're not there yet. And so you have to know as an educator what is typically expected here and what is maybe a little bit delayed, but you don't treat them as the number, you treat them as where they're at, right? So again, for those of you who are feeling uncomfortable or questioning or insecure or unconfident, just these basic concepts of, okay, well, the child is this age and I see them with my eyeballs and I see them on a piece of paper, but they're actually developmentally this age. That's where you spend the moments with them. That's where you connect with them, right? Because how many times have people, what's the word, maybe overestimated your abilities and you got frustrated, right? So children get frustrated too. And so as adults, we could be adding to that frustration. We could be adding to the behaviors. Are you serious? Yes. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. Now, the third thing, children also sense things. There's a whole piece with sensory processing disorder, and everybody has a little bit of this. Everybody has a little bit of this. And again, you're going to hear me use words like neurotypical, neurodiverse, neurodivergent. I don't like to say normal people and abnormal people, or normal people and special needs people. Nope. There is not one normal brain on the planet. I don't know what normal means. The word normal shows up on my clothes dryer and or my clothes washer, and I don't even know what to put in there. What are normal clothes? Jeans and a t-shirt. Normal is no longer applies in our society. We are neurodivergent. We are neurospectacular. We are neurotypical, or maybe unexpectedly neurodivergent. So there's a lot of different things that you guys need to keep in mind But the sensory piece is where, have you ever maybe like bumped your elbow on the wall and then completely didn't register that, like, because you're just busy with your day, and then later you come back and you see this huge bruise, you're like, what happened? That's an under registration of sensory. You just chose to focus elsewhere. Some kids are under registering sensory things like hitting their hand on a wall or hitting their head on a wall, or crashing cars together. Some kids over register. So you've seen kids who get barely touched and like, oh, falling apart. It's not wrong. We need to know these things, that there's sensory overload, there's sensory underload. So emotions could be processed here, and in the body. It's pretty wild. There's a lot going on. We used to look at emotions as just what we could see with our eyeballs. There's a lot more to it. So I call this a constant balancing act between our thoughts and our emotions and our senses, right? And behaviors come from any one of these things. Have you ever had a hunger pang, right? And now we have a term for it, hangry. Like you're hungry and then you're just not quite right, and maybe you're a little bit angry, so we call it hangry. I love our new languages because it's true. You have this sense of peace in your body, and then you're kind of off because you need to eat, and you act accordingly. You behave differently when you're hangry. Yeah. So do little kids. So do all kids. So do all people, right? So there's this constant balancing act, because a thought could trigger a behavior, an emotion could trigger a behavior, a sensory issue could trigger behavior, right? Absolutely. And again, you and I are in this piece too. Kids are always looking to you to see how to regulate. So let's say you had a sneeze brewing, right? We've all had this thing where you're like trying to figure out when the sneeze is going to come, or is it going to go away? And you're right. And if you started stomping around the room saying, I have this sneeze and I don't like it and I don't want it, what is a child going to do but look at that as how that's normal behavior? But if you say, excuse me, I'm processing a sneeze right now, I'm going to grab a tissue just in case, you get to model any of these behaviors for these kids, called social emotional learning, right? And same thing, if you're having a bad day, how do you manage your bad day? If Miss Sarah accidentally is using your coffee cup today, how do you manage that, right? And so there's this real interesting piece that I think as adults we forget, that we are being looked at constantly from our kids. Now, I'm not saying that you guys have to be perfect, because the Lord knows we're not, right? But at the same time, it's okay to say, wow, I'm having a hard time with this. I don't know what I'm feeling right now. My behavior's a little off right now. It's okay to be honest and humble about it, because that's what kids, they connect to. That's what kids respect. That's how, think about it when you were a kid. Do you like it when the adults in your world, like the parents and teachers and older siblings and friends, they acted perfect, or did they act human, right? I think our world is no longer in this like perfect zone of, we are all trying to work together to make things, to get through the day, really. I mean, honestly, I think that's been a little bit of a silver lining of COVID, that we've had a lot of, we were all struggling. It's not just some people and some people aren't struggling. We're all struggling. And it's a great time for you to be aware of your behaviors, because there's a lot of behaviors going on, and be more knowledgeable about behaviors in general. So that's why we're here. So I love it. So questions so far. Whew. Balancing act between emotions and behavior. Wow. Something, anything? I see a lot of stuff.
Michael actually has a question.
Great.
It says, if we as educators recognize a child as being slightly delayed in regards to cognitive development, should we meet the child where they're at with our development approach or appropriate language and approach only, or should we also encourage and aid in catching them up?
It kind of depends. So that's a great question. If you notice some delays, we always believe in early intervention. So if you are in the ACE environment, you're the preschool and the kindergarten, even like TK, you want to get that help for that child as soon as possible, right? Because even a child with autism with early intervention, autism, the severity of the autism can almost reach parity, almost I don't want to say erase, but with the right interventions at the right time, autism can almost neutralize. Unbelievable. Same with speech and language, same with learning disabilities, same with social emotional stuff. So if you see that a child's delayed, number one, you have to take as much data as you can on that. And because our opinion, sorry to tell you, it doesn't matter. I think that child is delayed. Prove it. Show me. Is it going to be on a rating scale? Is it going to be when they're the entire group was working on this and that one child couldn't finish it? Be more concrete with it and work with your supervisor, director, things like that. There are a lot of things that we can do. Again, first 5 is great for early intervention, anything like that. That's early. But a lot of times kids aren't really identified with certain things until 1st or 2nd grade. And so it's kind of an interesting thing where you can have a child kind of keeping up, and then when the academics show up, their skills don't meet the demand. So at that point, then you put in referrals to the assessment team and get the IEP process started. So there's a lot of things to do, but in the meantime, to answer the first part of your question, Michael, is do we meet them where they're at? Always. And do you want someone to meet you where you're at? Always. Right. And that piece of where they're at could be different every day, right? Some days we're doing great, and same with the kids. Sometimes they're doing great and where they're at is up here. Sometimes they're not, and where they're at is down here. Meet them where they're at, because that's where they're at, right? Once you want somebody to meet you there as well. Yeah, great question. One more?
Yes, this is from Shay or Shai. If we already recognize a child being delayed, how we can approach the parent that they didn't get offended, so they don't get offended?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Again, if you were in the ECE environment, if you have a child under the age of 5, that is not your job, unless you're a director. So that's why the director is the director, because they have a bachelor's degree and they're in that place. It is a interesting question. So if I'm talking to, if there's any directors here today, I would say, again, we keep it positive. We talk about the facts. It's not opinion. We say, I've noticed, the child is a little delayed in these XYZ areas. I've noticed, or we've seen over the course of the last month, 2 months, 3 months, there's a consistent level of not meeting the expectations at this developmental level. You keep it nice and clean, and you don't, again, just like with you're talking with kids, you keep it on the positive. And you say, great, with early intervention, this is really exciting that we can get in there and get some extra supports. Now, again, you are going to run into parents who are like, yes, sign us up. And you're going to run into parents who say, I don't want that on my child's record. Trust me, I've done independent assessments. I've been hired for families to look at children's behavior. Trust me, I've done a lot of this work where there's a lot of parents who are like open and willing, and a lot of parents who are ashamed that their child's not perfect. And so there's a lot of cultural saturation first there. But Shay or Shai, if you are the teacher that sees the first things, you need, again, you're in charge of the data and then reporting it to your supervisor, maybe site supervisor, supervisor director. If you are in the K-12 situation, you keep all your data as much as you observed or written things down, and then you make a referral to the assessment team. And so the parents can then agree to an assessment or not agree to assessment, or some parents agree to the assessment. And then when the services are offered based on what the assessment findings were, some parents will say yes, some parents will say no. Here's the thing, you have to cover your bases. You have to do what is right for you, but know your role so you're not overstepping boundaries. And if there's ever a conversation where sometimes the parents will kind of like pull you to the side and be like, oh, I know, just tell it to me straight, just on the down low. And be aware that, your language choices are key here. So, I see we always do the Oreo. He's got all these great qualities. There's some areas that need improvement, but overall, I think the student's going to be great with the right supports. Yeah, good questions. Okay,
Right.
good.
Marianne, might I chime in a little bit on that? Because extending it to the K-12 environment, you do have that resource. As a classroom teacher in the K-12, you may have a little more autonomy. and you don't have to go to the principal, but you do have typically that assessment team or that resource specialist teacher on campus that you can, make your observations and discuss it informally with that person. And that person can give you some feedback about how to talk with the parents about it and get the parents to possibly agree if it seems like it's necessary to make a referral. But you don't always just have to take on that full responsibility yourself up front, because parents can be defensive at points. So,
and it's hard. I do teach the behavior class here, Child Development 230, and I do have a handout called the Sales of Child Development. And a lot of times parents are nervous and they think that their child's going to be judged and slotted and pegged and this and that and other thing. And so I talk to, teachers, and maybe like again, when Janet said, you have to have the right role, the right supports in place, because the facts speak for themselves. But at the same time, you also have to make a connection with the parents, especially if they're nervous and they want to say no. You can't force them, but you can also talk to them in a language that they would understand and maybe understand, right? Because every parent loves their child. Every parent loves their child. So start with that, right? They want what's best for their child. They just might not know what that is at the moment. So there's a lot of education that comes and in connecting and helping that child through helping the parents. There's a lot there. So these are great questions, Shay. Good. Excellent. So let's jump in. So number one, we've talked about all these different pieces of behavior, but keep in mind there are layers. I made the connection earlier that what you see is only a tip of the iceberg, right? Because sometimes you're going to have a child who presents with, Sarah or, Marcella, she took my dinosaur, and they're coming to you at this, but there's more to it, right? Sometimes it's not just about the dinosaur, right? There's more to it though. So if you're only reacting to the behavior you can see, there's a lot more that may be there. Now, in the moment, we can't factor in every single possible nuance, but you do know if you are reacting, you're not acting, right? If you're reacting, you could invariably make the situation worse. So let's just take a second and look at what else could be going on. So something could have happened before the dinosaur incident, right? It could have been that the child was running late to school, which could be another issue, that maybe they had a rough morning, or maybe they didn't sleep, or maybe they didn't eat right. So there's a lot of things that can be going on. There could also be underlying developmental or sensory issues. You can have a child who is more interested in toys than people. That is an early indicator of possibly autism. And so sometimes kids are rigid in the toys that they play with, the toys that they choose, and that inflexibility, while it might be age appropriate, might give you an indicator of other things. Again, we're not here to diagnose, but we're looking through the layers here. And then also there's under the deepest layer is possible abuse and trauma. We don't know what's happening at home. We don't want to make assumptions there. But again, if you are able to catch Professor Johnson's workshop after this one on trauma and resilience, beautiful. We just started, we just updated, and we're teaching that class this semester, trauma and resilience, and it's fantastic. So if you know in your head there's these layers, but it's hard to identify all of them in that moment, just ask yourself, what else could be going on? What else could be going on? Because the behavior is there, and sometimes it is overwhelming, and then we start to get a little dysregulated ourselves. But maybe it's not just about the dinosaur or the something that happened in the classroom, or something that whatever the behavior started with. They'll tell you, I'm acting this way because, but there might be some other things going on. It's not that we don't believe them, but please, as an adult, as a leader, factor in other things that could be going there too. So when you attend to the moment, when you attend to the behavior, when you help try to figure it out, consider yourself like a sleuth, like a social scientist. I give you guys all the designation of social scientists. If you are working with children, they are in a social environment, and it is your job to figure out these underlying things that could be contributing. So just ask yourself, what else could be happening here? Because sometimes you can resolve the dinosaur issue and there's still kind of a residual behavior. So let's talk more about that. And just like you and me, we have more layers too. So I want to make sure that we're talking about behavior as an actual behavior. Let's talk about actual behaviors now. And there's just the real easy way to understand behaviors, the ABCs. And this is not just for young children. This is not for earlier environment. This is for everybody, you and me, everybody. The crabby bank teller and the guy on the corner, yelling. This is ABCs, happen to everybody. So A is for antecedent. It's what happened before the event. Again, when there is the struggle with the dinosaur or the tricycle on the yard, or somebody's not sharing the tetherball during recess, or even, so I forgot my book, I forgot my folder. Any sort of behavior has an antecedent, what happened beforehand. Now, it could be a child who just impulsively wants something and they go, well, I wanted to grab the ball. Okay, that may be developmentally appropriate. Let's start there, right? They just had an idea. I had an idea that I wanted to run my bike into the fence. That sounded fun to me. They had an idea. Anything goes here. The antecedents are anything goes, and it's theirs, not ours, right? So a lot of times adults will come and say, I saw this huge behavior and there was no reason for it. Really? They had a perfectly good reason. Did you ask? Did you assess? Same thing for you. If you've ever done anything ever, do you have a reason for it? Most likely. There was an antecedent, right? If I have a sneeze brewing, I grab a tissue. That's the antecedent. There's something happening. I'm going to prep. Kids sometimes aren't that sophisticated, so they're not prepping. They're just acting on what's going on in their head, in their minds, their bodies, right? But also they could be, they could have the emotions like we talked about, but they could also be reacting to the environment. It's too cold, it's too hot, it's too windy. I'm telling you right now, rain doesn't set kids off as much as wind, right? Because rain you can see, rain you can avoid, or rain we can go play in the mud. But wind, it's this constant thing all over our bodies, and kids with sensory issues or just little kids can't see it, but they're reacting to it. So sometimes kids are just dysregulated because of wind, right? Exactly. And then there could be also something happening in their body, like hunger pain, or a growing pain, or puberty, right? There's anything that could be happening. So I put a little asterisk there inside their bodies. Again, we call it sensory processing. And some people over-register sensory issues and some people under-register sensory issues. Think of it like—
Marianne, could I interrupt for a minute? I'm sorry, please. We're running out of time, and this is such a beautiful slide. So maybe the students, like I did, could take a picture of it if they have their cell phone available.
Please do.
And then if we could just think about you going through this a little more quickly, so we don't miss this wonderful information.
Of course. Thank you for keeping me on track. So think of the ABCs. The stuff happens before, the behavior happens, and then there's a consequence. The consequence is not necessarily a punishment. It's just maybe the other kid doesn't want to play with them anymore, or maybe there is a timeout, or maybe there is a loss of a toy or something like that. But it can also keep going back. And if they don't like the consequence, it could start the process over. So just think of the ABCs. It's super easy. And again, the recording, you guys will have access to the recording. So let's keep moving. Okay. So again, great quote to think of this. Instead of thinking what is wrong with this child, think what is happening to this child.
All right.
Yeah, great one. And so that came from Bruce Perry, Born for Love. Great book. I'll give you guys. Also keep in mind that teachers also have layers. You guys, come on. You guys are human too, right? And again, know your triggers. I talk a little bit about bias here because we have implicit and explicit bias. Please do this at the bottom. I put the Harvard implicit bias test. I have a friend who's gay and my son's identifying as pansexual. So I jumped in there and it's like, let me see if I have any weird biases about this. There's a bunch of different little mini tests in there and they're very, very telling. So jump in there. I do those in my classes. Very, very cool stuff. And again, I just wanted to show in here, there's an implicit bias. Even in me writing this, using this PowerPoint template, all the girls have tank tops. Why? I don't know. So if you go back and look at my character, I put sleeves on her. Okay, so the takeaways for today. We all have behaviors. Behavior's not neither good nor bad. It happens to all of us all of the time. Check yourself. Look at your biases. Are you saying that's good behavior and that's bad behavior? Is that a good girl and a bad girl and a good boy and a bad? Right? I even have bias where even in special needs, I sometimes miss that girls have autism because there are less girls with autism, but because I appreciate quirky girls because I'm a quirky girl. So I even have these little biases that kind of like, oh, well, I didn't even recognize that as autism at first in that particular girl. And I was thinking she was just being quirky. So there's a thing where we have to check ourselves, right? And we can even have these biases where you didn't even realize. And then also act as a leader, don't react, because you can be that one pivotal teacher who makes that connection with a child that lasts a lifetime. We all have that, our favorite teacher or scout leader or somebody who connected with us that actually put us on this interesting path all these years later. Last thing I want to leave you with is when you see a child differently, you see a different child. So I'm going to say that again. When you see a child differently, you see a different child. This child is not waking up to make your day hard. This person isn't this, even an adult like me. You know, sometimes adults can be a little bit more calculating, but nobody is really here to ruin your life. But if that's all you see, everybody's out here to ruin my life, then guess what? You're gonna be stuck yourself. But when you change the way you see a child, when you change the way you see a person, you see a different person. Yeah. Love this stuff. I do have a link here that I'm going to share really quick in the chat. This is for my Google document. And at the end, let's see, make sure I can do this here.
And while you're doing that, Marianne, everyone, please take a snap of the QR code in front of you. That helps us get some feedback about this particular session. Or use the bit.ly link. It's really important to us to get your feedback.
Please. And again, for me, I always make sure that if I can get feedback, then it helps guide me as an educator as well.
We want to make sure everybody does the evaluation, and your information was fantastic. You are a treasure to Santiago Canyon College and to education. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for the event. Great job.